Hello students, today we are going to discuss the Buddhist theory of state of nature. This unit would enable the readers to understand the Buddhist political thought, the significance of Sangha or the Buddhist community, the conceptualization of the state of nature, and the importance of two traditions in Buddhism, the Sambhalan tradition and the Ashokan tradition. To begin with, the history of Buddhism spans almost 2,500 years from its origin in India with Siddhartha Gautama to the rest of Asia. Buddha was one of the most brilliant and noble thinkers of all time to have influenced his devotees. Buddha is not just a proper name, it is also a descriptive title meaning the awakened one or the enlightened one. The emphasis in Buddhism is on the teachings of Buddha and the awakening of human personality. Buddhism has focused on the use of a variety of teachings to help people first develop a calmer, more integrated and compassionate self, and then wake up from restricting misbeliefs. Misconceptions which cause attachments and thus bring grief and misery, and the process through which mankind can be liberated from this worldly attachment, the cause of all suffering, is dharma. Buddhism therefore essentially consists of understanding, practicing and realizing dharma. We'll start with our discussion of Buddhist Sangha or the community. The Buddhist tradition has been for ages passed from one generation to another by the monks and nuns who make up the Buddhist community or Sangha. Years after the death of Gautama, differences arose in the Sangha. This led to the development of a number of monastic brotherhood, each following a somewhat different monastic code and different schools of thought. Only that which came to be known as the Theravada has continued to this day. It purports to follow the teachings of the elders of the first schism. It emphasizes on attaining deliverance or liberation by one's own efforts using the Dharma as guide. It is from the early Sangha's oral transmission of bodies of teachings that we derive our knowledge of Buddhism. Reflections on Buddhist political thought. Buddhism is best characterized as a religio-philosophical system which presents a whole view of the world and man's place in the entire schema of life. It sought to sanction the day-to-day life of an individual without theorizing a personal God. Buddhism is characterized by another worldly religion with its distaste for the worldly order. It had its influence on the cultural and religious practices of its adherents, and as such on statecraft, political institutions and practices. There are two primary paradigms that capture the heart of Buddhist political thought, the Ashokan model and the Sambhalan model. The Ashokan model has played a substantial role in shaping Buddhist conception of political power. The Ashokan model encompasses a balance between the ruler, the state, and the community of monks that constitute the Sangha, and the lay Buddhist people. The Ashokan king is a compassionate ruler who defends the Sangha and also maintains internal and external security. In a hostile and violent world, the powerful Ashokan king serves as the virtuous protector of the Sangha, the Dharma, and the people. The Sambhalan model is focused on creating a more rational and enlightened populace and thus a more just political system. The Sambhalan approach is named after the mythical Buddhist kingdom of Sambhala, where all people lived in profound harmony and peace. These two strands of Buddhist political thought are important in understanding the Buddhist idea of human nature, which in turn is an important precondition to comprehending the idea of the state of nature. Now we'll start with the theory of the state of nature. The Agana Sutta, exactly meaning the sutta pertaining to beginnings, was fittingly labeled by Rhys Davies as the Book of Genesis.
The story begins as a creation myth about the origin of the cosmos. The Agana Sutta purports to be an explanation of the origin of our four main castes: Brahmana, which is the clergy or the teachers; Khattiya, which is the warriors; Vesa, farmers and merchants; and Sudha, the servants and the peasants. There comes a time, Vaseta, which is the name of Buddha's Brahmin interlocutor, when sooner or later, after a long period, the world contracts. But sooner or later, after a very long period, this world begins to expand. At a time of expansion, beings are mostly reborn in this world. Here they dwell, mind-made, feeding on delight, self-luminous, moving through the air, glorious, and they stay like that for a very long time. The story of the beginning goes like: savory earth spreads itself out on the surface of the ocean. One of the beings tastes it, and longing arises in that being. Seeing the first being enjoying the savory earth, other beings taste it, and the craving arises in them. As these beings continue to eat, they lose their luminosity and slowly transforms to being matter-made. This same process occurs several times with different kinds of foods. Each time, the beings become more bodily and also more disposed to misconduct, such as arrogance, spite, lust, and so on. With the passing of time, the foods available to them becomes less tasty and harder to obtain. Eventually, a stage is reached when the main food is rice, which needs to be cultivated with some effort. This leads to the being to divide the fields into individual plots so that each person could be assured of reaping the benefit of his or her own labor. But ownership inevitably leads to theft. To solve the ongoing problem, the beings decide to appoint one of them to serve as the enforcer of the rules, the great elect. Thus, for Buddha, the state of nature was a state of bliss and content, till civilization raises its head and men were divided on the basis of material wants. For a conceptual understanding of Buddhist idea of state of nature, Hobbes' Leviathan sets the stage nicely. Buddhism provides the basis for a convincing critique of Hobbes' moral psychology, his narrow focus on individualism, and his account of conflict in the state of nature. Hobbes conceptualizes human nature as egoistic, self-centered, and self-regarding, driven by the desire to maximize his pleasure. The combination of attributes like natural egoism and equality seeks to undermine social harmony. The state of nature, therefore, is a state of constant fear and conflict. The state of nature is a state of perpetual insecurity and distrust because all men must preserve themselves and maximize their power. This is Hobbes' imaginary state of nature, where man has the right to judge and to take whatever is necessary for self-preservation. For Hobbes, to avoid insecurity and death, the individual pursuit of self-interest must be restrained by a sovereign authority who is capable of enforcing civil law. Contrary to Hobbes, Buddhist politics focus on the need for greater virtue and a more enlightened people. Buddhism recognizes the fear and insecurity of the Hobbesian state, but also emphasizes the inescapability of illness, aging, and death, and hence the idea of cooperation and state-led welfare assistance. Buddhists argue that the pursuit of material gains is based on misapprehension and does not lead to happiness. Buddhism stresses on the importance of peace. It is fundamental understanding of Buddhism that contradicts Hobbes. Real peace comes from an inner peace of mind, which requires much more than the peace provided by external political authority. Only personal transformation based on insight and wisdom will end interpersonal conflict that is an innate feature of the Hobbesian state of nature. The two traditions of Buddhism are important as they help in comprehending the nature of human beings that precedes our understanding of state of nature. We'll begin with the Sambhalan tradition. The Sambhalan paradigm is important in the context of Buddhist idea of the state of nature. The Sambhalan tradition has four main principles. First, it is non-monastic approach that addresses all people, and as such, it adapted to everyday socio-economic needs and family life. Second, it offers a more secular and universal Buddhist vision. Third, it offers a cosmopolitan vision and a conception of universal responsibility for an interconnected global order. And fourth, its perception for social justice, world peace is cultivating kindness, generosity, and understanding. The Sambhalan approach has a clear socio-political dimension which emphasizes on the self-transformation of the individual itself in order to promote social justice, developing inner peace, seeing the interdependence of all beings. The aim is to live every day in a more enlightened, non-aggressive, and sympathetic way. Competition and consumerism must be replaced with compassion, forbearance, and simplicity. External and internal conflict are caused by inner poisons of greed, hatred, and ignorance. These three poisons are the cause of all our self-destructive emotions. The Dalai Lama described these types of emotion as afflictions. It is afflictive emotions that are real hindrance to both peace of mind and peaceful relationship. Buddhism agrees with Hobbes that the pursuit of pleasure and power is a source of conflict and insecurity in the state of nature. Man's urge to satisfy his desire is the source of all his dissatisfaction and misery. Like Hobbes, Buddhism tells us to seek peace, but it is an inner peace that he is concerned with, not the artificial truths imposed by an external political authority. Sovereign power brings civil peace, but what we really need is an inner transformation of self-desire. The transformation of human beings will transform the state of nature from an insecure, nasty, brutish state to a blissful state of peace and happiness. Thus, the essence of the political philosophy of Sambhalan approach is rooted in the idea of individual enlightenment. While competitive individualism is rooted in the misconception of egoism, insight meditation, as proposed by Buddhism, is the transformative means for overcoming competitiveness, materialism, anger, hatred, and all the delusions of selfish egoism. Therefore, in a world where everyone is devoid of non-violence and compassion, there is no injustice, and thus the Hobbesian state of nature is transformed into a state of idyllic cooperation. The Sambhalan tradition assumes near universal enlightenment, which is impossible to achieve in contemporary society, and that is why Sambhala is rightly called a mythical kingdom. The Sambhalan vision provides an inspiring ideal, but it must be supplemented by an account of just law and political structures that regulate imperfect social relations and corrupting influence of passion on men. That is why there is a need for rulers to maintain civil order. An analogy of Hobbes' conception of state of nature as the origin of political authority from Buddhist creation myth goes thus. After the emergence of elements and then planets out of a primordial fire, life slowly evolves. When human first evolved, there were unlimited amount of clear-grained rice. There was abundance for all, and all property was communal. With time, some people became increasingly interested in sexual relationships, and as a result, they were cut off from the community. Once they became greedy, despite having their needs satisfied, they hoarded rice. With the introduction of lust and greed, passion flared, and with shortage of rice and the jealousies of romantic passions, conflict, competition, and discontent inevitably followed. This led to theft, fraud, and deception, and in response to these relations, retribution and punishment occurred. Therefore, the need for a ruler to restore civil peace and order became clear to all. The best among the people was thus chosen to rule and control society. In Buddhist mythology too, the origin of government is a solution to depravity and disorder in order to create civil order and reintroduce security and morality. The Ashokan tradition shaped the political and social institutions in the Theravada Buddhist countries of Southeast Asia. Roughly from 304 to 230 BCE, about 100 years after the death of Buddha, Ashoka subjugated, united, and ruled the northern territories of what is now contemporary Asia. After his bloody conquest over Kalinga, King Ashoka converted to Buddhism and committed himself to the benevolent and just rule of his subjects. King Ashoka promoted religious tolerance and devoted his time to spreading the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and supporting the community of monks, the Sangha. He renounced war as an instrument of statecraft. The Ashokan Buddhist tradition, like Hobbes and Hume, has always emphasized the problem of competitive individualism and recognized the essential role of political authority. The essence of the Ashokan model of politics is a tripartite relationship between the Sangha, the ruler, and the people. The Sangha is a central institution because monastic life is the primary path to enlightenment, and the community of monks preserves and passes the teachings of Buddhism. The people respect the Sangha, and therefore the endorsement of the Sangha is essential to the perceived legitimacy of sovereign power. A ruler may have de facto power, but its legitimacy depends on the affirmation of the Sangha. The Sangha serves as a check and balance on the sovereign authority, but its own political power and position is reinforced by the ruler and the people. The Sangha preserves the Dharma and serves the religious needs of the people, and by doing so, it plays an important role in the creation of a just and enlightened society. The association of teachings of Buddha with the political leader is a natural extension of the Ashokan political model. Therefore, absolute but not uncontrolled or unconditional monarchy is the traditional corollary of the doctrine of Buddhist kingship. Thus, the limits of the Sambhalan and the Ashokan approach set the stage for the political significance of the Sangha or the Buddhist community of monks. as a check on the sovereign power, which is the great elect or Mahasamakta. To kind of wrap up our discussion, from the above discussions, it is clear that the conception of the idea of state of nature in Buddhist political thought is important as it precedes the need for the institutionalization of the great elect. The two traditions, Sambhalan and the Ashokan tradition, had its influence on how man is viewed in Buddhist thought and the consecutive impact of such perception on the edifice of the state of nature. The Sambhalan vision makes clear individual growth towards collective enlightenment is important. However, such a view is utopian in contemporary scenario. The Ashokan tripartite system emphasizes the role of government in creating an environment where unenlightened people, the Sangha, and the laity can pursue greater enlightenment. The idea of the Ashokan king is out of step with contemporary democratic situations. But a synthesis of the two models can serve the purpose of a just and equitable state. In this way, Buddhism can function like a civil religion that provides the groundwork for a shared promise to a common, impartial, and just society. With this, we come to the end of our discussion. Thank you